as you all know, I do try to speak to what the world is thinking about and share that, and I certainly believe that God expects us to honor godly mothers. And God has given us mothers in our lives as a blessing as we begin and start our journey here on this earth. So we're going to take a look at, and I can tell you right now, there are all kinds of, if you were to sit down and think, and a lot of times I'll look at sermons that have been preached in the past, I'll look at some of the things that I've done in the past, you'll find there are countless different ways that you can approach a sermon on Mother's Day. There's just all kinds of ways that you can do it. One of them that I'm thinking about in the future actually is mother is more than just a noun. Mother is also a verb, because being a mother requires a great deal of action. I didn't select that this time, but there's a lot going on. But I wanted to just kind of take a look at a spiritual view of motherhood, or what a godly mother might look like. Because if you think about, and I didn't prep for this, okay? So I want you to know, this is just coming off the top of my head very quickly here. When I think about what the world thinks about motherhood, I think the first thing they think of is friend. They now see mom as friend. And so there's this idea that motherhood involves making sure that, you see these mothers that they want to dress like their daughters sometimes. They want to relive their teenage years sometimes. And so motherhood is just about being a friend to your child, maybe preparing food or something like that. But that's really about all that it is. And just making sure, and of course, motherhood means making sure that you're taking care of your children and that you're respecting their privacy. Because a good mother will respect privacy. So, they're going to make sure that they go ahead and allow them to have their space and never look into their personal business and never pay attention, let them lock their door on a regular basis. That's kind of how the world sees mothers in my mind. Another thing is that they see motherhood as kind of a step below a working woman. Have you noticed that? Have you seen kind of a change toward that idea, where this idea of being a mother is not quite as glamorous, is not quite as productive in your life as if as a woman you went out and you got a job in corporate America, or you did something else first. They kind of see motherhood as kind of a secondary thing that just kind of comes along. And they also see motherhood as something that they can do while holding down a job full-time and say, I don't need no man to help me raise a child. That's kind of how mothers look at things. I can do all these things. I can have a full-time job and focus on that primarily. And by the way, I'll make sure that my kids have food on the table. But that's going to come from the job. But I'm not going to be there to raise them. But I don't need no man there to help me out either, right? That's kind of how. But how does God view motherhood, or what does a spiritual or a godly mother look like? What was God's intent with the idea of having mothers in the home and making sure that mothers existed in the home in order to care for who? Obviously, mothers care for their children. Proverbs, again, 31 talks about the idea of a worthy woman, but there is a section in there that speaks to the idea of her children, which would mean that she is a mother. Her children arise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Why? Because a godly woman, a godly mother, a spiritual mother, is worthy of honor, is worthy to be respected. So the first thing I want to mention is that a spiritual mother understands her greatest responsibility is to take the blessing God has given her and teach him or her to love God. And yes, mothers, even though they may wreck your body for 9 months, even though they may make the first 9 months that they're here on this earth miserable, crying all the time and not letting you sleep and things like that, you all know they're a blessing from God. You all know that it's worth allowing your body to be stretched. You all know that it's worth going ahead and getting up in the morning. Otherwise, after every first child, a woman would just say, forget it. Right? I'm not going through 9 months of that again, and I'm not going through having to get up in the morning and do all this and change diapers and do all these things that I have to. But you realize that the child is a blessing. You realize that the child is actually a gift from God. But as we talk about and as we study God's Word, we realize that every gift that we receive from God actually belongs to Him. And so I think it's important to remember that a godly spiritual mother will teach their child about who God is. And while they're here, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 6 and 7. These words I command thee this day shall be on thine heart, and you shall teach them diligently to thy children. Proverbs 22:6 talks about training up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Again, that's not an absolute fact. That's a basic truth that is generally true. Under God's plan, and I'll put it that way because I want people to think about it, under God's plan versus maybe how it is today, who spends the most time with the children and training the children when they're young? Well, in God's plan, the man is going to work and he is taking care of the financial needs, and it's the mom that's there with the children all day long. It's the mom that really has the right to say, I'm glad when they go back to school that I get a little bit of a break. Because the mom is with them all the time. Dad can come up with an excuse to leave, can't he? He can find a reason to go ahead and go a lot of times. Dad has a different responsibility, but it's mom that's there. It's mom that's the driving force behind. Generally, in a godly home, mom is the one that drives the education side of the child, doesn't she? She's really the one that's there and makes it, because dad's at work and dad's doing other things and dad has his spiritual responsibilities. But there is a lot that a mother does in regard to, from day one, training them. I like the statement in Psalm. It said, we will not hide them from their children, showing to the generation to come the praises of the Lord. Showing the children to come the praises of the Lord. Helping them and raising them to understand. And then we know when Paul writes to Timothy, he talks about the faith that was developed, that was placed in him by both his grandmother and his mother, right? Why? They're there. They're with them. They're with the child more. And in that case, his father wasn't a child of God. His father wasn't someone that was a child of God. And so we put on that the greatest legacy we can leave our children is a heart that loves and follows God. And I want you to think about, and we're not going to read it all, but in 2 Samuel, we're introduced to a woman. Actually, we're introduced to two women. One who is blessed to be able to have children, and one who would love to have a child, but is not able to. And one who then prays to God because she's unable to have a child. And she asks God for a child, but she says that she is going to give that child to God, right? She understands. And so we look at and we go through and we see the struggle and we see how the one who can have children mocks the one who can't. And we can see the strain and the pressure and the love that this woman would have if she could just be a mother, right? If she could just have a child. Well, we know what takes place. She ends up having a child, and she ends up weaning and raising him. And then once that child is weaned, she does exactly what she promised to do, doesn't she? She turns him over for service in the work of the Lord. And it's interesting because if you look at that child is in the service and he grows in favor and stature with God and man. That's how that child that ended up serving the Lord and dedicated to the Lord turns out. We find out as we look in chapter 3 that the children of the other woman don't turn out so well. We find the mother that didn't choose to dedicate her children to God, boy, they had they had all kinds of problems. We read, it says in chapter 2, verse 11, after the prayer that was sent up on behalf of the child by Hannah, we read in verse 11 at the end of that prayer, then Elkanah went to his house at Ramah, but the child ministered to the Lord before the priest. So we have this leaving of where he ends up. And then it goes on to say that the sons of Eli were corrupt, they did not know the Lord, and various things that took place with them. But what does it mean? What does it mean to say I'm going to dedicate my child to the Lord? I mean, it sounds good, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm going to dedicate my child to the Lord. And there is a process, is there not, in the world today where certain religious practices, they get it wrong. You know, they say, okay, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna sprinkle this child. There might not even be a sprinkling, but they have a dedication ceremony of some kind of giving their child to God, right? And then they never raise the child to become a child of God in the manner in which God intended. They say, I've dedicated my child to God, right? I'm giving you to God. But then they never look to God to see how to raise that child so that it is dedicated to God. And that's what dedicating your child to God means today. It means teaching them Scripture. It means encouraging them on their own to learn how to worship and pray to God. It means helping people or helping children learn to love God's truth. That's what a spiritual, godly mother does. One writer said the greatest statement about a mother is not, she gave me everything, but she helped me know God. That's what a spiritual mother does. A spiritual mother, a godly mother, helps me know God. A worldly mother today wants to be good friends, right? Wants to make sure we don't wreck our personal relationship, right? The relationship that they have as mother and daughter is more important to them than the relationship that child has with God. That's not a spiritual or godly mother. A spiritual, godly mother wants their child to know God. Spiritual motherhood requires a godly influence. And let me tell you, folks, women are an influence on that child from day one, right? Aside from visually seeing whoever delivers the child, which depends on if you have a doctor, midwife, or aside from whoever delivers the child, what's the first face that the baby comes in contact with? And you know what? How quick does the baby know who that is? Right? Baby knows who mom is right away, don't they? They've spent 9 months with mom. They recognize who mom is. So mom is influencing from the very beginning, right? It starts from the very beginning. And if you want to be a spiritual mother, then it requires godly influence. If you just want to play the role of mom, that you can play the role of mom. You know, you can say, yeah, I've got kids. I let them take care of themselves. I got them. God gave me the ability to have children, so I've got children. Well, just because you can have children, or just because you do have children, does not make you a true mother, and does not make you godly in any way, shape, or form. We're familiar with a lot of these. Proverbs 22 is on there again. 2 Timothy is on there again. When we look at influence in Proverbs 31:26, again talking about this woman, worthy woman, she opens her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. And isn't it interesting that those two things are together? Because we kind of talked about a week ago, it's not always what you say. Sometimes it's also how you say it. Isn't it interesting that she's got the wisdom, but her tongue is the law of kindness, right? She knows, but there's a responsibility. And you know what? If mom isn't respecting dad, the child sees that. See, the child is learning how to, a young child is learning what the interaction between a husband and wife should be, right? They see it. If mom is always going off to work and leaving the child at home, then they don't see that mom has a responsibility to the children. So that if they ever have kids, then it's not mom's job to go ahead and do that, right? You have to show them. See, in order to have godly spiritual children, you have to be a godly spiritual example. And sometimes that doesn't always work. But that's, at a minimum, your responsibility, isn't it? And oh, by the way, I don't care what anybody says, nobody ever forced a woman to lay down and sleep. Outside of rape, and we're not going to go there, but nobody forces any woman to lay down with a man. She may not have wanted a child. Sometimes you gotta deal with there are positive and negative consequences. The consequences are just a thing. They're neither bad nor good until we know what the surrounding circumstance is. But a woman can't just sit back and say, well, I never wanted to have a child. Well, then don't lay down with the man. That's easy enough. You have a responsibility. And so if you've done that, then again, can you still be a godly and spiritual leader if you laid down with a man and had a child out of wedlock? Well, you bet you can. And you better. You better figure out how to fix it and get it right? Because now you have a responsibility. But guess what? The woman doesn't just get to say, well, I created the baby, but I don't want nothing to do with it. I don't know the true statistics, but I would guess probably upwards of 80% of the time, if there's ever any question, does the man or the woman get the child? The woman gets the child probably 80 to 85% of the time, at least I would guess. And the man can just walk off, right? It's not supposed to, but that can happen. So it's important. It's important because before little ears can comprehend what you say, little eyes can comprehend what they see. Think about that. Before the little ears understand the words that are coming out of your mouth, they can see the actions that you're doing. And so a godly woman is going to raise with the proper influence. Whatsoever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that the Lord shall receive the reward, or you shall receive the word of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. So that applies to raising children too, doesn't it? Whatever you do, doesn't that include motherhood? How many of us stop and think, mothers, how many stop and think, am I raising my child as a service to the Lord? Am I raising my child in such a way that honors him? He gave me this gift. He expects me to do right by it. But am I really doing it right? Or do we sit back and say, well, I'm mom, so I'm in charge. Right? Yes, you're mom. And you are in charge of whether or not that baby gets to eat. You're in charge of the way that they're going to act as they grow up. And you can be in charge and do it all wrong. Or you can be in charge and do it all right. But oh, by the way, ultimately, whose child is that? If it was a gift from God, if it was a blessing from God, and all the blessings we receive belong to God, then it follows logically that while it's my child here on earth to raise, that child belongs to God. Right? So we need to ask, we talk about when you're given something to care for that belongs to somebody else, we say, how do you generally treat that? You want to treat it maybe even better than what you think, the person that owns it might treat it. Well, we can never treat others the way God does, but we can certainly try our best to treat that child as a precious possession, right? As a precious item that needs to be taken care of. So there is influence, and a spiritual mother provides spiritual influence. This is a tough one to think about, but you can see it in action, and you'll see it in action. A spiritual mother does what's best for her children, even if it causes her pain. Even if it causes her pain. Ask yourself, as a mother with your children, or if you don't have any children, as you think about your mother, if you were in a situation where there was only enough to eat for one person, who do you think the mother is going to give the food to? A spiritual mother is going to say, you know what? I may struggle a little bit, but I'm going to make sure my child eats. Right? spiritual mother, we talk about, and we talk about the idea of discipline in Proverbs 13:24. And the idea of, we look at the scripture, the idea, and it states, he who spares the rod spoils the child. But I think that's the universal he, as in mankind. I think a spiritual mother will punish their child, even if it hurts them. And it hurts. It hurts mom when she has to tell a child they can't do something they really wanted to do. But it's for the benefit of the child, right? If the mother says, well, it hurts me too much to do this, so I'm going to withhold the punishment, what does the child learn? They want what's best for the child regardless. And that also falls into the area of discipline. And that's the difference I'm talking about between being a mother and trying to be just a friend, right? A mother should be up in the business of their child. I'll tell you that right now. A good mother is up in the business of what their child's doing. If a child has a diary, a good mother knows what it says. And there's probably a lot of people in the world that are watching this that may get to watch and say, man, you're dead wrong. I'll tell you right now, God says I'm spot on. I believe God says that's spot on. Because I believe God says, I gave you this child. It's up for you to take care of them. So you need to know what's going on in their life. They don't need a best friend. They need a mother. They've got plenty of friends. Got plenty of friends to go and do stuff with. They need a mother. Love disciplines. A spiritual mother will correct and train because she wants what's best, not because of what's easy. Then the flip side of the Proverbs passage is the passage that we have in Hebrews where it talks about in 12:6 that God disciplines to bring about growth and blessings. And a spiritual mother will do the same thing. It talks about it's not fun when we're at the time that we're disciplined, right? It's never fun at the time, but it's for our growth and for our benefit. And so when we do not apply, when a mother does not apply that discipline, then she's not allowing growth. She's stunting the growth of that child, who, oh, by the way, belongs to God. So needs to be treated the way God would treat her or him. So there is this effect. In 2 Timothy 3:15, she teaches God's word. She plants the truth, even if it takes extra time, effort, and sacrifice. You know what? Kids say, I'm taking a break. It's Saturday, right? I don't have to go to school. I'm gonna take a break from the week. I'm gonna get some. My son's looking at me now because he knows one of his statements that I get on him about is, I'm gonna get some me time. And kids think about that. Well, you know what? Saturday night, a godly mother, a spiritual mother, is checking to make sure that her family is prepped for what's coming on Sunday. She doesn't get me time. If she needs to be spending time helping the kids or her husband get focused on what's coming tomorrow, then she has to give up her own time to do that. That's what a spiritual mother does. She sacrifices her time and her energy. She doesn't get to say, well, just like the kids go to school Monday through Friday and then they get 2 days off, so I'm going to work Monday through Friday and then I'm going to take 2 days off. Okay. There's only 2 jobs in the world. I don't care what anybody says. There's 2 jobs in the world that are 24/7. Motherhood and fatherhood. They're 24/7, whether you want them to be or not. You just don't get to say, hey, I'm taking vacation. Because unlike being able to leave your job for a week or 2 and it'll survive just fine, you can't walk away from your kids for a week or 2 and expect things to be fine. It's a sacrifice. But you know what? Godly mothers really don't even think about it. They don't sit at the clock, look at the watch, and they're saying, we do this at work. Man, when's this day going to end, right? I can't wait. We're watching our watch. We're looking at the clock. Godly mother doesn't sit there and say, boy, I can't wait till it's time to put the kids to bed. Or whatever it is. They're just there. They're sitting, and they'll look at the clock, and the next thing they know, it's like, oh, wow, I need to be preparing dinner. So I'm already doing something that's taking up time that's not me time. And the next thing they're thinking is, man, I need to get this next thing handled. Right? It's all about what they can give and what's best for their children. She puts her children's spiritual and physical well-beings ahead of her own desires. And you've got verses there that you can take note of, and I encourage you to do that. The statement, a spiritual mother's love sacrifices today so her children can be blessed tomorrow. I think that's a fair statement. A couple of examples that came to mind for me immediately of mothers who were willing to do what needed to be done even though it was painful. Jochebed in Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. You don't know that name? She is the mother of Moses, right? And remember that she was able to hide her child for a period of 3 months. When this decree went out that there should be death, she was able to hide her child for 3 months. You think she bonded with the child in the course of 3 months while she was hiding and caring for it? Well, you better believe she did. But when she could hide him no longer, she then put him in the ark of bulrushes, sealed it, and set the baby among the reeds. And she watched and made sure she didn't just send him off and then walk away, right? Boy, I love my child. I sure hope someone comes along and takes care of him, right? She actually stays and she watches. And because of her faith and love, Moses is spared and he becomes the great deliverer of Israel. And oh, by the way, what happens? She still gets to take care of her child, right? She's there to help and serve and work with taking care of her child. God gave her that. But Mom, would it be hard for you after protecting your child for 3 months to give it up? You think no, your mindset would be that would tear me up, right? That would tear me up. She said, I've got to make sure my child still lives. Right? No matter how much it hurts me, I want to make sure my child lives. And then for me, this is the one that sticks to me. I don't know why, but this is the one that sticks to me, is in 1 Kings chapter 3, going from verses 16 through 28. And everybody talks about the wisdom of Solomon. And yes, I think you can use that, and that's a great example of wisdom, and continue preach it on. But I think there's a missing of something else that's a major concept that exists. I want you to think about two women, not just one. Two women each have a child about the same time. As they're away and the babies are resting, one of those babies dies. I want you to think about if you were the mother of the child that died. So what do you think about that for me? Your child has died in the night, this little baby. We often really beat up this mother because of what does she do? She switches the babies, right? She switches the babies and makes the claim that her child is still alive, and it's this other woman's child who has died, right? Now imagine that. Imagine you're the mom, your child's still alive, and someone's saying, nope, this isn't your child. Prove it. Prove it. You know, babies get switched at birth today and people don't catch it. Because sometimes you just can't tell for sure with a little baby, right? So now you have a situation. So they take this situation and they go before Solomon, and Solomon says, well, I can solve your problem. He said, well, just cut the baby in half. Each of you get a portion of the baby. One woman's like, I don't know what she's thinking. I guess half is better than nothing. I don't know what's going through the lady's head who's okay with it. But one mother says, go ahead and let her have. The mother of the child that's still alive says, let her have the baby. Why? Because much as it kills her to give up her child, she knows that it's better for the child to live than to be chopped in half. I mean, that's pretty easy to understand. What's best for the child? And then we see Solomon's wisdom when he says, clearly, this is the real mother. This is the one who's willing to do what's best for the child, even though it hurts her. This other woman would have been like, well, I guess neither of us get a baby. I mean, stop and think about it. Where do they end up? Where do they end up? If the child is cut in half, then the woman whose baby died is no worse off than the woman now who her child was chopped in half. Well, I guess we're on the same level, right? But the mother says no. The mother, the one, she says, I'll give my child up. Give my child up. As long as it means he survives. I'll give him to this person who was taking him. God uses courageous, selfless mothers to protect his children and fulfill his plan. And then Mary comes to mind, right? Mary, the mother of Jesus. And again, we don't treat Mary as a saint in the Lord's church, but we do respect the fact that Mary was a good woman, that Mary was chosen by God because she was a good woman to raise his child here on earth. She was a spiritual mother who trusted in God despite a very difficult situation. And I want you to think about, again, we have the verses here that you can look at. You can see that the account in Luke that talks about why he does what he does. She trusts God in Luke chapter 2, treasures God's word. As a mother, that's a good example. She stands by Jesus at the time that he is at the cross. And even once he's gone, she's seen praying with the early disciples. But I just want you to think about this idea of a virgin woman. You're a young virgin woman who has been betrothed to a man, and all of a sudden you're told you're going to have a child. Think of the scandal, right? Think of the scandal that would bring about for this woman. She trusted God anyway. She accepted it. And oh, by the way, throughout her entire raising of Jesus, she knows of the pain and suffering that he goes through at times, right? She knows the things. She doesn't fully understand. I don't believe everything that's taken, but she sees her child suffer, and she understands that that's what's best for him because that's what God's plan was, right? Because her son, Jesus, tells her this is the way things need to be, right? She had to watch. She stands by and watches him while he's on the cross being killed in the worst possible manner that you could kill someone at the time. And she stands by, and we never see her fight it. We never see her go to Jesus and try to manipulate Jesus, say, you know what, it's really going to hurt me if you do this, right? Yeah, it's really going to, why don't you? She never tries to talk him out of what he needs to do. She recognizes God's will is God's will, and she's going to follow God's will, and she's going to expect her child to follow God's will as well. And then she's still going to trust and believe in God when her child is dead and gone. Even after the fact that her child is no longer with her, she is still a godly example. Mary teaches us that God is faithful and his plan is always worth trusting. It was difficult from day one. It was difficult from day one, and this idea of a potential scandal all the way up to having difficulty at the time of his birth, watching him suffer during his life, and then at his death seeing how bad it was. And yet, Mary is an example of a godly mother and a spiritual mother, and talks about and teaches. So we'll sum it up really this way. Spiritual, or again, and you've heard me say godly over and over again, you could say godly mothers, they dedicate their time, their love, and their children to God. It starts first with the life they lead toward God in the beginning and how they live their life. And when the time comes, they've already given their time and love to God, and when they're blessed with a child, then they recognize they give that child to God. The Lord's church needs to be thankful for spiritual mothers. The Lord's church needs to appreciate spiritual mothers. And I'm going to make one quick side note, and then we'll call the lesson yours because I appreciate your time. It's run a little bit long. As a side note, you don't have to be biologically related to be a mother. You do not have to be biologically related to be a mother. Matter of fact, a lot of times there's a lot of biological mothers out there who are not mothers to their children. That's why I said motherhood. Mother is a verb. It's not just a noun. So for those of you maybe that weren't blessed to have children, you still have the opportunity to do the things that a spiritual mother does. You still have the opportunity to be examples to the young women. You have the opportunity to stand in the gap when other mothers are not stepping up and doing what they need to do.
That's right, brother.
It's not for everyone to have a child. God's will is God's will. But whether you're blessed with a child or not, you can still be a godly mother. And you can still be what God wants you to be as a child. And you should still be honored for the things that you do. If there's anything that we can help you with as we close out the service this morning, as always, we offer up what is God's invitation. It's not my invitation. It's not anybody else's invitation. It's the invitation that actually Christ gave when he said, "Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden." The invitation doesn't come from any of us. It comes from Christ. And it's to come to him, to take his yoke upon you, and then to be worthy of him, to be buried in the waters of baptism, to rise anew and live a proper life. Or if you're in a situation where you've done that and you've fallen away, you always have the opportunity to ask God for forgiveness and to turn back. And oh, by the way, as a side note, and this is another soapbox for me, don't wait until you sin and have to ask God for forgiveness, when if you already know you're starting down a path you don't want to go, why not pray for help to prevent you from stumbling in the first place? And that's something you can pray for as well. And if there's anything that we can do to help you, let us know while we stand and while we sing.